They say blood runs thicker than water. My brother Kaelor proved that wrong when he stole my girlfriend Lunara and called me pathetic for fighting for her. He stood there in my own apartment, arm wrapped around the woman I was planning to propose to, laughing as he told me I never deserved her anyway. 5 years later, karma caught up with him hard. His perfect marriage was crumbling, his wife was filing for divorce, and his whole golden boy image was about to shatter. So he came crawling back to me, tears in his eyes, begging for help to save everything he'd built on my broken heart. What he didn't know was that I'd spent those 5 years becoming the kind of man who could destroy his world with a single phone call. But sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't giving someone what they deserve. It's giving them exactly what they ask for. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. 5 years of silence broken by the sound of my brother's voice, cracked and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. Not even when we were teenagers and he crashed Dad's car into the neighbor's fence. "Fendrel," he whispered, and I could hear the tears he was trying to hide. "I need your help, please. I know I have no right to ask, but I'm drowning here." I sat up in my penthouse bedroom, looking out at the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet, a view that cost me 7 figures but felt worth every penny. Especially in moments like this. "Kaelor," I said, my voice steady and calm. "It's been 5 years since you told me I was pathetic and never deserved happiness. What makes you think I'd lift a finger to help you now?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel his desperation bleeding through the phone line. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because you're the only person who can save my marriage, and despite everything, you're still my brother." I almost laughed. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Here was the man who destroyed my life calling me for salvation. The golden boy who always got everything he wanted, reduced to begging the brother he'd labeled as worthless. But I didn't laugh. I'd learned patience in the 5 years since he shattered my world. I'd learned that the sweetest victories come to those who wait. "Your marriage to Lunara," I said, letting the name hang in the air like poison. "No," he said quickly. "That ended 3 years ago. We divorced after 18 months. This is about Talise, my wife Talise. She's leaving me, Fendrel, she's taking everything. The house, the business, the reputation I've spent years building. I'll be ruined." I set the phone down for a moment and walked to my home office. The walls were lined with awards, certificates, newspaper clippings documenting my rise from the ashes of heartbreak to the pinnacle of success. Forbes had called me one of the most influential tech entrepreneurs under 35. The Wall Street Journal had featured my company's revolutionary data analytics platform on their front page. All of it built on the foundation of rage and determination that Kaelor had unknowingly provided. I picked up the phone again. "What makes you think I can help with your marriage problems?" "Because Talise works for Meridian Holdings, your biggest competitor. And word is, she's been feeding them inside information about my construction projects. Industrial espionage. If this gets out, it won't just destroy my marriage, it'll destroy everything I've built." Now that was interesting. Meridian Holdings was indeed my biggest competitor, but they were also about to become my acquisition target. I'd been planning their hostile takeover for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. "And you think I have influence with Meridian?" "I think you have influence everywhere," he said, and there was something like awe in his voice. "I've been watching your career, Fendrel. I know what you've become. I know what I lost when I lost you." The admission hung between us like a confession. For 5 years, I'd wondered if he ever regretted what he'd done, if he ever realized that he'd destroyed not just my relationship, but our brotherhood. Now I had my answer. But it was too little too late. "Tell me something, Kaelor," I said, walking back to the window. "Do you remember what you said to me that night? The exact words?" His breathing grew heavier. "Fendrel, please, can't we just—" "The exact words," I repeated. A long pause. Then, in a voice so quiet I had to strain to hear it. "I said you were pathetic, that you never deserved her, that she was too good for someone like you. And what else? I said that some men are born to win, and others are born to watch winners take what they want." The memory hit me like a physical blow. Even after all these years, after all my success, Those words still had the power to cut deep. I could see it so clearly. My small apartment in Bellingham, the shocked look on Lunara's face as Kaelor pulled her close, the cruel smile on his lips as he delivered that final devastating blow. "You remember correctly," I said, "and now you want the man you called pathetic to save you from your own failures." "I was wrong," he said, and now he was openly crying. "I was so wrong, Fendrel. I was jealous, okay? I was jealous of how much she loved you. How she looked at you like you hung the moon. I'd never had anyone look at me that way. So you took her. So I destroyed her, and you, and myself." His voice broke completely. "Lunara left me for another man 8 months after we married. Said I was too insecure, too needy. Said I was trying to fill a hole that couldn't be filled. She was right. I should have felt satisfaction hearing about his failed marriage. I should have felt vindicated, knowing that his betrayal had ultimately cost him everything. But instead, I felt something else entirely. Something colder and more calculating. And now history is repeating itself with Talise. She says I'm paranoid, controlling, that I don't trust her because I know I can't be trusted." He laughed bitterly. "She's not wrong either. I keep waiting for someone to take her away from me the way I took Lunara away from you." "Karma has a sense of humor," I said. "Please, Fendrel, I know I don't deserve your help. I know I burned that bridge years ago, but I'm begging you. Brother to brother, help me save my marriage, and I'll do anything you ask. Anything." There it was, the desperation I'd been waiting to hear. The complete submission from the man who'd once called me pathetic. He was offering me everything, handing me the power to destroy or save him. And the beautiful irony was that he had no idea how thoroughly I'd already won. "I'll think about it," I said. "Thank you. God, thank you, Fendrel." I said I'll think about it. Don't thank me yet." I hung up and set the phone on my desk, then poured myself 3 fingers of 25-year-old scotch. The amber liquid caught the city lights, casting golden reflections across the crystal glass. 5 years ago, Kaelor had stood in my apartment and told me I was pathetic. He'd taken the woman I loved and laughed at my pain. He'd shattered my world and walked away without looking back. Now he was calling me in tears, begging for my help to save a marriage that was crumbling because he couldn't stop being the same selfish, insecure man who'd destroyed us both. I raised my glass to the Seattle skyline and smiled. Not a happy smile, not a satisfied smile, a predator's smile. "Thank you, Kaelor," I said to the empty room, "for giving me exactly what I've been waiting for. Because I was going to help him. I was going to help him in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. And when I was done, he'd understand that calling me pathetic had been the biggest mistake of his life." The game was finally about to begin. To understand why Kaelor's betrayal cut so deep, you need to understand what we were before he destroyed everything. Before that night in my Bellingham apartment, we weren't just brothers. We were best friends. Growing up in the small coastal town of Fernhaven, we were inseparable. Kaelor was 2 years younger, but somehow always managed to keep up with me and my friends. He was the kind of kid who could charm his way out of any trouble, who could make adults laugh with his quick wit and easy smile. Teachers loved him. Girls noticed him. Even as a teenager, he had that golden boy magnetism that made people want to be around him. But he looked up to me. That was the thing I held on to for years afterward, trying to make sense of his betrayal. He genuinely looked up to me. I was the one who taught him how to throw a perfect spiral in our backyard. I was the one who showed him how to talk to girls without stuttering. When he got into a fight with bullies at school, I was the one who had his back, even though it meant detention for both of us. "You and me against the world," he used to say when we were kids. And I believed him. When I graduated from University of Washington with my computer science degree, Kaelor was in the front row cheering louder than anyone. When I landed my first job at a tech startup in Bellingham, he helped me move into my apartment, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs without complaint. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My brother, the genius, he'd tell people, and there was genuine pride in his voice. He's going to change the world someday. That was the brother I remembered. That was the brother I trusted with everything, including the most important person in my life. I met Lunara Feldrin at a coffee shop near the university campus on a rainy Thursday morning in October. She was struggling with her laptop, papers scattered across her table, muttering under her breath about corrupted files and lost research. Her long auburn hair fell in waves around her face as she hunched over the screen, and something about her frustrated determination made me smile. "Need help?" I asked, approaching her table with my own coffee in hand. She looked up with the most incredible green eyes I'd ever seen, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. "Unless you're a miracle worker who can resurrect dead hard drives, I doubt it," she said, but she was smiling. "Though I suppose I'm desperate enough to try anything at this point." I spent the next 2 hours helping her recover her master's thesis on environmental policy. She was brilliant, passionate about climate change and sustainable development, with a mind that could cut through complex problems like a laser. She was also funny, self-deprecating, and completely unaware of how stunning she was. By the time we'd saved her research, I was completely smitten. "Let me buy you dinner," I said as we packed up her rescued files. "It's the least I can do for providing such entertaining commentary on Microsoft's software design philosophy." She laughed, a sound like silver bells. "You know what? You saved 3 months of work. Dinner seems like a bargain." That dinner turned into a walk along the bay. The walk turned into a weekend together. The weekend turned into the most incredible 6 months of my life. Lunara was everything I hadn't known I was looking for. She challenged me intellectually, supported my ambitions, and somehow made even mundane activities feel like adventures. She'd drag me to farmers markets on Saturday mornings, then listen for hours as I explained my ideas for new software applications. She believed in me in a way that made me believe in myself. "You're going to build something amazing," she'd say, curled up next to me on my couch as rain drummed against the windows. "I can feel it. You've got that restless energy of someone who's meant for big things." I'd started working on my own project by then, a data analytics platform that could process massive amounts of information and identify patterns that human analysts might miss. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious for a guy working out of his studio apartment. But Lunara never let me doubt myself. "Show me again how the algorithm learns," she'd say, leaning over my shoulder as I coded late into the night. She didn't understand the technical aspects, but she understood the vision. She could see what I was trying to build even when I couldn't see it myself. The night I decided to propose, everything felt perfect. My startup was gaining momentum. We'd just signed our first major client, and venture capitalists were starting to take notice. Lunara had accepted a position with an environmental consulting firm in Seattle, which meant we'd be in the same city for the first time since we'd started dating. I'd bought the ring 2 weeks earlier, a simple solitaire that had cost me 3 months' salary but was worth every penny when I imagined it on her finger. I'd planned everything perfectly. Dinner at the little Italian place where we'd had our first real date, followed by a walk along the waterfront where I'd get down on one knee under the stars. I was so nervous that afternoon that I called Kaelor just to hear a friendly voice. "Tonight's the night," I told him, pacing around my apartment with the ring box in my pocket. "You're really going to do it," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "My brother's getting engaged. Damn, Fendril, I'm proud of you." "Think she'll say yes?" "Are you kidding? That girl worships you. Of course she'll say yes." He was right. She did say yes. She cried when I got down on one knee by the water, and she said yes before I could even finish my rehearsed speech. We stood there kissing under the streetlights while tourists walked around us, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. "I can't wait to call your brother," she said as we walked back to my car, her hand clutched in mine, the ring catching the light with every gesture. "He's gonna be so excited." That should have been my first warning, the way she lit up when she talked about calling Kaelor. The way she always asked about him when we talked on the phone. The way she laughed just a little too hard at his jokes when he visited. But I trusted them both. I trusted him because he was my brother, and I trusted her because I loved her. The idea that they might betray me never even crossed my mind. We set the wedding date for the following spring. Lunara threw herself into planning with the same intensity she brought to everything else. She'd spread bridal magazines across my coffee table and talk for hours about flowers and venues and color schemes. I mostly just nodded and agreed, happy to see her so excited. "Your brother should be your best man, obviously," she said one evening as we looked through photographer portfolios. "He's going to look so handsome in a tux." Again, I should have noticed something in her voice, a softness when she talked about him that was different from how she talked about other people. But I was too wrapped up in our future to pay attention to the cracks forming in our foundation. The last perfect night was a Friday in February. Lunara had driven up from Seattle to spend the weekend with me. We'd cooked dinner together, her specialty, garlic shrimp over pasta, and opened a bottle of wine to celebrate my company's latest milestone. We'd just closed a deal that would triple our revenue. "To the future," she said, raising her glass as we sat on my couch with takeout containers scattered across the coffee table. "To us," I corrected, clinking my glass against hers. She smiled and leaned against my shoulder. "Sometimes I can't believe this is real. That I get to marry my best friend and watch him conquer the world." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "Just wait until you see what we build together." We fell asleep on the couch that night, her head on my chest, my arms wrapped around her like I could protect her from everything bad in the world. I woke up before dawn and just watched her sleep, thinking about how lucky I was, how perfect everything had become. 18 hours later, Kaelor destroyed it all. But that night, lying there with the woman I loved in my arms and my company's future bright with possibility, I thought I had everything a man could want. I thought my brother would always have my back, and the woman I loved would always be mine. I thought we were unbreakable. I was wrong about everything. Looking back, the signs were there long before that night in February, but love and trust can make you blind to the most obvious betrayals, especially when they come from the people you trust with your life. The first crack appeared during Thanksgiving dinner at our parents' house in Fernhaven. Lunara and I had driven down together, her engagement ring catching the autumn sunlight as she pointed out landmarks along the coastal highway. She was nervous about spending a holiday with my family as my fiancé, fiddling with her hair and asking me for the third time if her dress was appropriate. "They already love you," I assured her as we pulled into the driveway. "Mom's been planning this dinner for weeks. She's more excited than we are." And it was true, my parents had embraced Lunara from the moment I brought her home. Mom had immediately started treating her like the daughter she never had, while Dad appreciated her sharp mind and genuine interest in his work as a marine biologist. But it was Kaelor's reaction that should have set off alarm bells. He'd been living in Portland for the past year, working construction and supposedly trying to find himself after dropping out of college for the second time. He'd driven up that morning, arriving just as we were setting the table. "There's my favorite future sister-in-law," he said, sweeping Lunara into a hug that lasted just a beat too long. When he finally released her, his hands lingered on her waist for a moment that made something uncomfortable twist in my stomach. "Kaelor," she said, and her cheeks were flushed in a way that had nothing to do with the cold November air. "You look good, really good." He did look good. Construction work had filled out his frame, adding muscle to shoulders that had always been broader than mine. His hair was longer than usual, giving him a rugged look that seemed to attract appreciative glances from every woman in our small town. "Not as good as you," he said, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made me step closer to her side. "Engagement suits you." Throughout dinner, I kept noticing little things. The way Lunara's attention seemed drawn to him whenever he spoke. How she laughed just a little too hard at his stories about construction mishaps and difficult foremen. The way he found excuses to touch her, a hand on her shoulder when he reached for the salt, his fingers brushing hers when she passed him the bread. "Tell them about the Patterson project," Lunara said during dessert, turning to me with bright eyes. "The data analysis system he's building is going to revolutionize how construction companies track efficiency." I started explaining my latest contract, but I noticed Kaelor's expression grow dark as I talked about the technical specifications and potential applications. When I mentioned the possibility of expanding into other industries, his jaw actually clenched. "Sounds complicated," he said when I finished. "All that computer stuff. Must be nice to work with your brain instead of your hands." There was an edge to his voice that I'd never heard before, not quite resentment, but something close to it. "Different kinds of intelligence," Dad said diplomatically. "Fendral's got the analytical mind, but Kaelor's got the practical skills, both valuable." "Right," Kaelor said, but he was looking at Lunara as he spoke. "Some people build with code, others build with steel and sweat. I wonder which one feels more real at the end of the day." Lunara's eyes flicked between us, and I saw something there I didn't like. A kind of consideration, as if she was comparing us and wasn't sure which way the scales would tip. The second warning came during Christmas week. Lunara had invited Kaelor to our engagement party in Seattle, and he'd driven up from Portland specifically for the event. I was grateful he'd made the effort. Despite his occasional mood swings, I wanted my brother there for one of the most important nights of my life. The party was at Lunara's apartment, a cozy two-bedroom in Capitol Hill that she'd decorated with string lights and winter greenery. About 30 people showed up. Friends from college, colleagues from her environmental consulting firm, a few people from my startup. It was intimate and warm, exactly what we'd wanted. But I spent most of the evening watching Kaelor work the room with that easy charm of his. He had a gift for making people feel like they were the most interesting person he'd ever met, and I watched him deploy it strategically throughout the night. "Your brother is incredible," Lunara's friend Melissa whispered to me as we watched him tell an animated story about a construction accident involving a runaway cement mixer. "How is he still single?" That was exactly what I was wondering. Kaelor had always been popular with women, but he never seemed to stick with anyone for long. He'd date someone for a few months, then find some reason to end things. Too clingy, too independent, too ambitious, not ambitious enough. There was always something wrong. "He's picky," I said, but I was watching the way his eyes kept finding Lunara across the room. The moment that really should have triggered my alarm systems came near the end of the party. Most of the guests had left, and the few remaining friends were helping clean up. I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher when I heard Lunara and Kaelor talking on the balcony. "You're lucky," he was saying, his voice softer than usual. "He's a good man, maybe too good for his own good sometimes." "What do you mean?" Lunara asked. "He sees the best in everyone, trusts people completely. Sometimes I worry that someone's going to take advantage of that." "He's not naive, Kaelor. He's just optimistic." "There's a difference?" She laughed, but it sounded forced. "You make it sound like optimism is a weakness." "Isn't it? In the real world, I mean. Nice guys finish last because they're too busy being nice to fight for what they want." There was a long pause. When Lunara spoke again, her voice was quieter. "And what about you? Are you too nice to fight for what you want?" I stepped closer to the kitchen window, straining to hear his response. But just then, Melissa called out asking where the recycling bin was, and by the time I'd helped her, Kaelor and Lunara had come back inside. The third and final warning came in January, just 2 weeks before everything fell apart. Lunara had been acting strange for days, distant, preoccupied, jumping whenever her phone buzzed. She claimed it was work stress, a big environmental impact assessment that was giving her headaches. But then I saw her phone light up with a text while she was in the shower, and the name on the screen made my blood run cold: Kaelor. I had never gone through her phone before, never even been tempted. But something about the secretive way she'd been acting made me pick it up and look at the message preview. "Can't stop thinking about what you said. We need to talk soon." My hands were shaking as I set the phone back down. What had she said to him, and when had they been talking without me knowing about it? I told myself it was innocent. Maybe she was planning something for my birthday, which was coming up in March. Maybe they were coordinating a surprise. But the sick feeling in my stomach told me otherwise. That night at dinner, I tried to bring it up casually. "Heard from Kaelor lately?" I asked as we shared Chinese takeout at her kitchen table. "Not really," she said, but she didn't meet my eyes. "Why?" "Just wondering. He seemed a little off at Christmas. Thought maybe he'd called you." "Off how?" "I don't know, moody, like something was bothering him." She was quiet for a long moment, picking at her low mien with unusual focus. "Maybe he's just lonely. It must be hard, watching everyone else pair off while you're still looking for someone. He's never had trouble finding dates." "Finding dates isn't the same as finding someone who matters." She looked up at me then, and there was something in her green eyes that made my chest tighten. "Sometimes I think he's jealous of what we have." "Jealous how?" "The way we fit together. The way we can talk for hours about everything and nothing. The way you look at me like I'm the most important thing in your world." Her voice softened. "Not everyone gets to experience that kind of love." I reached across the table and took her hand. "He'll find it. He just needs to stop running from commitment long enough to let someone in." She squeezed my fingers, but her smile seemed forced. "I hope so. I really do." That was the last real conversation we had before everything imploded. 3 days later, I found out exactly what kind of commitment my brother was ready to make. and it involved stealing the woman I loved right out from under me. The night my world ended started like any other. Lunara had driven up from Seattle to spend the weekend with me, something we'd been doing every other week since her job started. She seemed nervous when she arrived, fidgeting with her engagement ring and avoiding eye contact, but I attributed it to work stress. She'd been pulling long hours on the environmental assessment, and I could see the exhaustion in the dark circles under her eyes. "How about we just order pizza and watch a movie?" I suggested as she set her overnight bag by my bedroom door. "You look like you could use a quiet night." "Actually," she said, her voice tight with something I couldn't identify, "I invited Kaelor to come up. I hope that's okay. He said he had something important to discuss with you." A chill ran down my spine. What kind of important? "I don't know. He wouldn't tell me over the phone. Just said it was family business." Kaelor arrived an hour later with a bottle of expensive whiskey and that charming smile that had always been his best weapon. But there was something different about him that night. A tension in his shoulders. A hardness in his eyes that I'd never seen before. "Brother," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a challenge than a greeting. "Thanks for letting me crash your romantic weekend." "Everything okay?" I asked, studying his face. "Lunara said you had something important to discuss." "All in good time," he said, brushing past me into the living room. "First, let's catch up. It's been too long since we had a real conversation." We settled into my small living room, Kaelor on the couch, me in the armchair, Lunara perched on the edge of the coffee table between us. The arrangement felt awkward, like we were forming a triangle with her as the focal point. Kaelor poured 3 glasses of whiskey, his movements deliberate and controlled. "To family," he said, raising his glass. I clinked my glass against his, but something about his toast felt ominous. The whiskey burned going down, and I noticed Lunara barely touched hers. "So," I said, trying to break the strange tension in the room, "what's this important family business?" Kaelor set down his glass and leaned back against the couch cushions. "It's about honesty, actually. About truth. About stop pretending things are something they're not." "I'm not following." "Aren't you?" His eyes flicked to Lunara, then back to me. "Haven't you noticed anything different lately? Any changes in the people closest to you?" My stomach dropped. "Kaelor, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your fiancé has been calling me almost every day for the past month. Texting me, seeking my advice about your relationship." I looked at Lunara, hoping to see confusion or denial on her face. Instead, I saw guilt. Raw, undeniable guilt. "Is that true?" I asked her. She nodded slowly, not meeting my eyes. "I was confused about some things. I needed perspective from someone who knows you well." "What kind of perspective?" Kaelor answered before she could. "The kind that helps her realize she's about to make the biggest mistake of her life." The room went silent except for the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. "Excuse me?" "She's not happy, Fendrel. She hasn't been happy for months. She's just too kind, to tell you the truth." I turned to Lunara, desperate to see denial in her face. Instead, I saw tears beginning to form in her green eyes. "Lunara," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is that true?" "It's complicated," she said, and those 2 words shattered something inside my chest. "No," I said, standing up abruptly. "It's not complicated. Either you want to marry me, or you don't. Either you love me, or you don't." "I do love you," she said, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "But love isn't always enough." Kaelor leaned forward, his expression suddenly intense. "She needs someone who can match her passion. Someone who understands what it means to work with your hands, to build something real and tangible. Someone who doesn't hide behind computer screens and abstract concepts." "Since when do you care about her needs?" I demanded, turning on my brother. "Since when do you even think about what makes other people happy?" "Since I fell in love with her," he said simply. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered backward, gripping the back of my chair for support. "What did you say?" "You heard me. I love her. And she loves me." He stood up and moved toward Lunara, who was now sobbing openly. "We tried to fight it. We tried to pretend it wasn't happening. But some things are bigger than loyalty or family obligation." "You're lying," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I could see the truth in their faces. The way Lunara leaned toward him, the way his hand found her shoulder with familiar ease. "Show him," Kaelor said softly. Lunara reached into her purse with shaking hands and pulled out a small velvet box. "My engagement ring. The ring I'd saved for months to buy. The ring she'd been wearing for 4 months. "I'm sorry," she whispered, setting the box on the coffee table between us. "I'm so sorry, Fendrel. I never meant for this to happen." "When?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "When did this start?" "Christmas," Kaelor said. "The night of your engagement party. We went for a walk after everyone left, and we talked for hours. Really talked. About life, about dreams, about what we wanted from the future. And you decided you wanted my fiancé. I decided I couldn't pretend I didn't have feelings for her, and she couldn't pretend she didn't have feelings for me. I looked at Lunara, searching her face for any sign that this was some kind of mistake, some misunderstanding that could be fixed. "You love him," I said. "Not a question, a statement." She nodded, unable to speak. "More than you love me." Another nod. I sat down heavily in my chair, feeling like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "So what now? You two ride off into the sunset and leave me to pick up the pieces?" "It doesn't have to be ugly," Kaelor said. "We can handle this like adults." "Adults?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Adults don't steal their brother's fiancé. Adults don't spend months lying and sneaking around behind family's back. "We never physically crossed any lines until tonight," Lunara said quietly. "We never even kissed until an hour before we came here." "How noble of you," I said. "You only emotionally cheated for 2 months before making it physical." Kaelor's expression hardened. "Don't make this about morality, Fendrel. You want to know the truth? The real truth?" "I'm not sure I can handle any more truth tonight. She was never really yours to begin with. She settled for you because you were safe, predictable, a good provider who would give her a stable, boring life. But that's not what she actually wants." "And what does she actually want?" "Passion, adventure, someone who makes her feel alive instead of comfortable." He moved closer to Lunara, his hand finding hers. "Someone who can match her fire instead of trying to contain it." I stared at them, these two people I'd loved more than anyone else in the world, and tried to process what I was seeing. They fit together in a way that hurt to look at. The way her body curved toward his. The way he seemed to radiate a confidence I'd never possessed. "You think I'm boring," I said to Lunara. "I think you're wonderful," she said through her tears. "But wonderful isn't the same as right. We're too similar, Fendrel. We're both cautious, both planners. We enable each other's fears instead of pushing each other to grow." "And he pushes you to grow?" "He makes me feel brave," she said simply. "When I'm with him, I feel like I could do anything, take any risk, be anyone." "And when you're with me?" She was quiet for a long moment. "When I'm with you, I feel safe, comfortable, like nothing bad could ever happen. And that's not enough. I thought it was. I wanted it to be. But I can't marry someone just because they make me feel safe." Kaelor stepped forward, and for the first time that night, there was something like sympathy in his expression. "You're a good man, Fendrel. You deserve someone who loves you completely, not someone who's settling for comfort." "Don't," I said, my voice sharp. "Don't you dare try to make this about what I deserve. You stole her. You spent months manipulating her, convincing her that what we had wasn't enough." "I didn't steal anything," he said, his sympathy evaporating. "You can't steal something that was never really yours. She chose me, brother. She chose passion over predictability. She chose betrayal over loyalty. She chose authenticity over obligation." I stood up, anger finally overriding the shock and pain. "Get out!" "Fendrel," Lunara started. "Both of you, get out of my apartment. Get out of my life." "We need to talk about this like rational adults," Kaelor said. "There are practical matters to consider. Wedding deposits, guest lists." I said, "Get out." They didn't move. Kaelor crossed his arms, that familiar stubborn set to his jaw that I remembered from childhood arguments. "You're being pathetic," he said quietly. "Throwing a tantrum instead of accepting reality. This is exactly why she doesn't want to marry you." The word hit me like a slap. Pathetic. "What did you say?" "You heard me. You're being pathetic. Standing there feeling sorry for yourself instead of fighting for what you want. Some men are born to win, and others are born to watch winners take what they want." His eyes were cold now, calculating. "Guess which one you are." Something inside me snapped. I lunged forward, my fist connecting with his jaw before I even realized I was moving. He staggered backward, more surprised than hurt, blood trickling from his split lip. "Fendrel, stop!" Lunara screamed, stepping between us. "Fighting now?" Kaelor laughed, wiping blood from his mouth. "A little late for that, don't you think? Where was this fire when it mattered? You son of a—" "Enough!" Lunara's voice cut through our confrontation like a blade. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. This toxic masculinity nonsense where you have to fight over me like I'm a prize to be won." She turned to me, her green eyes blazing with an emotion I'd never seen before. "This is why I can't marry you, Fendrel. You don't see me as a person with agency. You see me as something that belongs to you, something that can be stolen. That's not true, isn't it? You haven't asked me once tonight what I want or how I feel. You've just been angry that your property was taken by someone else." Her words cut deeper than Kaelor's fist ever could, because underneath the anger and betrayal, I knew she was right. I had been thinking of her as mine, as something that could be possessed and protected rather than someone who could make her own choices. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm sorry, you're not my property. You never were." "Thank you," she said, and some of the tension left her shoulders. "But that doesn't make what you did okay, what either of you did. You could have broken up with me first. You could have been honest instead of sneaking around for months." "You're right," she said. "We handled this terribly. We were cowards, and we hurt you unnecessarily. I'll regret that for the rest of my life." Kaelor stepped forward, putting his arm around her waist. "But we're not going to regret being together. What we have is real, Fendrel. It's not going away." I looked at them standing there together, and suddenly I felt empty. Drained of fight, drained of anger, drained of everything except a bone-deep exhaustion. Then I guess there's nothing left to say. "We want to try to maintain some kind of relationship," Lunara said. "You're important to both of us." "No," I said simply. "I can't do that. I can't watch you two together and pretend it doesn't kill me. Fendrel, please, just go, please." They gathered their things in silence. At the door, Lunara turned back one last time. "I really did love you," she said. "I want you to know that." "I know," I said. "I loved you too." After they left, I sat in my empty apartment surrounded by the remnants of our evening, 3 glasses with whiskey still in them. The engagement ring sitting on my coffee table like an accusation. The faint scent of Lunara's perfume still hanging in the air. I picked up the ring box and held it in my palm. 4 months of salary, 2 years of planning, a lifetime of dreams, reduced to a small velvet container that weighed nothing at all. That's when the real pain hit. Not the sharp shock of betrayal, but the deep, grinding ache of loss. I'd lost the woman I loved and my brother in one night. The 2 people I trusted most in the world had decided I wasn't worth their loyalty. I threw the ring across the room, and it hit the wall with a small, insignificant sound. Then I sat on my couch and cried until dawn. The morning after my world ended, I called in sick to work and didn't leave my apartment for 3 days. I existed on leftover pizza and bourbon, ignoring the increasingly worried voicemails from my business partner and the few friends who knew about the engagement party planned for the following month. On the 4th day, my phone rang with a call from my mother. "Fendrel, honey," Kaelor told us what happened. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Do you want to come home for a while?" The fact that he'd already called our parents, already spun the story his way, set a fresh wave of rage through me. But underneath the anger was something else, a cold, calculating fury that I'd never felt before. "What exactly did he tell you?" I asked. "That he and Lunara fell in love, that it wasn't planned, but they couldn't fight their feelings anymore. He said you took it hard, but that everyone would be better off in the long run." "And you believe that?" There was a pause. "I believe that these things happen sometimes, that the heart wants what it wants, even when it means destroying your own brother." "Fendrel, I know you're hurting, but—" "He didn't fall in love, Mom. He saw something I had and decided he wanted it. There's a difference." I hung up before she could respond, and I knew that Kaelor had won this round too. He'd gotten to our parents first, painted himself as the reluctant lover swept away by forces beyond his control. By the time my version of events reached them, it would sound like sour grapes from a rejected fiancé. That's when I realized something that would define the next 5 years of my life. If I was going to survive this, I had to be smarter than him. I had to think 10 moves ahead while he was still celebrating his victory. I opened my laptop and started making lists, not of what I'd lost, but of what I still had. My company was growing rapidly. I had a brilliant business partner in Marcus Tharvin who'd already proven his loyalty by declining multiple job offers from larger firms. I had investors who believed in our vision, and clients who trusted our capabilities. More importantly, I had something Kaelor had never possessed, the ability to delay gratification and play a long game. That afternoon, I drove to the office for the first time since the breakup. Marcus took one look at my face and poured 2 cups of coffee without saying a word. "Rough weekend?" he asked when I'd settled into my desk chair. "Lunara and I broke up," I said simply. "She's with my brother now." Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "Jesus, Fendrel, I'm sorry, that's brutal." "It is what it is, but I need to channel this energy into something productive, or I'm going to go insane." "What did you have in mind?" I pulled up the business plan we'd been developing for our next phase of expansion. I want to accelerate everything. The Seattle office, the enterprise contracts, the venture capital series, all of it. That's aggressive. We'd be risking a lot if we move too fast. "I'm done playing it safe," I said. "Safe gets you a stable, boring life. Safe gets you betrayed by the people you trust most." Marcus studied my face carefully. "You sure you're thinking clearly right now? Major business decisions probably shouldn't be made when you're emotional." I've never been thinking more clearly in my life. And I meant it. The fog of comfortable predictability that Lunara had accused me of hiding behind had been stripped away, leaving my mind sharp and focused in a way it had never been before. Over the next 6 months, I threw myself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I was first in the office every morning and last to leave every night. I studied market trends, analyzed competitor strategies, and refined our algorithms until they could process data faster and more accurately than anything else on the market. The breakthrough came in August. Our pattern recognition software identified a correlation between social media sentiment and stock price fluctuations that no one else had noticed. Within weeks, we had 3 major investment firms bidding for exclusive access to our platform. "We could be millionaires by Christmas," Marcus said as we reviewed the offers. "Multimillionaires," I corrected, "and this is just the beginning." I moved to Seattle in September, ostensibly to oversee our new West Coast operations, but really to put 300 miles between myself and the memories that still haunted Bellingham. I rented a small apartment in South Lake Union, close enough to walk to our new office, but anonymous enough that I could disappear into the city's tech boom. That's when I started hearing rumors about Kaelor and Lunara. They'd moved in together, which wasn't surprising. What was surprising was how quickly their passionate romance had devolved into something uglier. According to mutual friends who still kept in touch, they fought constantly. About money, about her career, about his lack of ambition. "She seemed stressed," my college friend Jennifer told me when we ran into each other at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market. "Really stressed. Like, losing weight and dark circles under her eyes kind of stressed." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. Whatever anger I felt toward Lunara, I didn't want to see her unhappy. "She asks about you sometimes," Jennifer continued. "How you're doing, whether you're dating anyone." "And what do you tell her?" "That you're thriving, that you moved to Seattle and your company is taking off." She paused. "She seems relieved to hear you're okay, but also kind of sad." "Sad that I'm not pining away for her?" "Sad that she might have made a mistake." By winter, the rumors had intensified. Kaelor was drinking too much and had been fired from 2 construction jobs for showing up late and picking fights with supervisors. Lunara had taken a higher-paying position with an environmental consulting firm in Portland, partly to support them both and partly, according to Jennifer, to have an excuse to travel for work. "They're talking about marriage," Jennifer told me during another chance encounter, "but not in a happy way. More like something they think they should do because they've already blown up their lives for each other." I filed this information away and continued building my empire. By the end of my first year in Seattle, our company had quadrupled in size and was being courted by venture capitalists from Silicon Valley. I'd hired the best talent I could find, poached key employees from competitors, and established partnerships with major tech companies that would have been unthinkable just 18 months earlier. But I wasn't satisfied with business success alone. I wanted to become the kind of man who could never again be called pathetic by someone like Kaelor. I hired a personal trainer and spent my early mornings at the gym, transforming my soft programmer's body into something leaner and more powerful. I took public speaking classes to overcome the social anxiety that had always held me back in professional settings. I learned to play chess from a master who taught me to think strategically about every move. Most importantly, I started building a network of allies and information sources that would serve me well when the time came to act. Marcus noticed the changes first. "You're different," he said one evening as we worked late on a presentation for potential investors. "Harder somehow, more focused." More effective? Definitely more effective, but also more calculating, like you're always thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Maybe I am. Is this about your brother? About what happened with Lunara? I looked up from my laptop screen. This is about becoming the kind of person who doesn't get blindsided by betrayal. The kind of person who sees problems coming and positions himself accordingly. That sounds exhausting. It's liberating, I said. When you stop trusting people to do the right thing, you're never disappointed when they don't. That winter, I heard through the grapevine that Kaelor and Lunara had indeed gotten married. A small ceremony in Portland with just their immediate families present. No honeymoon, no big celebration, just a legal formality to legitimize what they'd built on the ashes of loyalty and trust. I felt nothing when I heard the news. Not sadness, not anger, not even satisfaction that their grand passion had been reduced to a courthouse wedding. Just the cold recognition that they'd made their choice and would have to live with the consequences. I sent a bottle of expensive champagne to their apartment with a note. "Congratulations on getting what you wanted. Here's to living with it." I never heard back from either of them. By the end of my second year in Seattle, I'd achieved something I'd once thought impossible. I was genuinely happy. Not the comfortable, predictable happiness I'd known with Lunara, but something sharper and more satisfying. The happiness that comes from building something meaningful with your own hands and mind. Our company had been acquired by a larger firm for $43 million, making me wealthy beyond anything I'd ever imagined. But more importantly, I'd proven to myself that I was capable of rising above betrayal and building something better from the ruins. I bought the penthouse apartment with the Seattle skyline view. I started dating again, carefully and strategically, learning to enjoy companionship without the desperate need for validation that had made me vulnerable before. I traveled, invested wisely, and began planning my next business venture. And through it all, I kept careful track of Kaelor and Lunara's declining fortunes. Not out of vindictiveness, but out of strategic awareness. I'd learned that information was power, and power was protection. When the call finally came 5 years later, I was ready for it. I'd been ready for years. Because the boy who'd been called pathetic and watched his world burn was gone. In his place stood a man who'd learned that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was becoming so successful that your enemy's opinions became irrelevant. But that didn't mean I'd forgiven or forgotten. It just meant I'd learned patience. The investigation into Kaelor's marriage began 3 months before his desperate phone call. Not because I was actively plotting against him, but because information has a way of finding you when you occupy the right circles of power and influence. I was at a tech industry mixer in downtown Seattle when I first heard Thalys Corvain's name. She was describing her work at Meridian Holdings to a group of venture capitalists, her voice passionate as she explained their new approach to sustainable construction materials. Smart, articulate, and strikingly beautiful in that effortless way that made every man in the room lean closer when she spoke. "Fascinating work," said David Chen, a partner at one of the city's most prestigious investment firms. "Your husband must be proud to have such an accomplished wife." "Actually, my husband works in traditional construction," she replied, and something in her tone made me pay attention. Different philosophies, you might say. "Opposites attract?" David suggested with a smile. "Something like that," Thalys said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. I introduced myself later that evening, recognizing the quality of ambition that had driven my own success. She was impressive. MIT engineering degree, previous work with sustainable development projects in developing countries, a mind that could switch effortlessly between technical specifications and big-picture strategy. "You're Fendril Caro," she said when I handed her my business card. "I've heard about your acquisition by Innovate Systems. Brilliant work on the predictive analytics platform. Thank you. And you're transforming how the construction industry thinks about environmental impact." We talked for 30 minutes about market trends and technological innovation before I learned that her husband was Kaelor Vinreth. She didn't know we were brothers. Kaelor had apparently never mentioned my existence, which told me everything I needed to know about how he viewed our relationship. "Vinreth Construction," I said carefully. I'm not familiar with them. Small operation, she said, and there was something defensive in her voice. Mostly residential projects in the Portland area. My husband prefers the hands-on approach to building. Over the following months, I made it my business to learn everything about Meridian Holdings and Talisa's role there. Not for any malicious purpose initially, but because understanding your competition requires understanding the people who drive their decision-making. Talisa was clearly one of their rising stars, spearheading initiatives that could revolutionize sustainable construction. What I discovered was a woman trapped between two worlds. Her professional life was brilliant and ascending, while her personal life seemed to be slowly suffocating her ambitions. Through industry contacts and careful observation at professional events, a picture emerged of a marriage under severe strain. Marcus noticed my increased interest in Meridian Holdings during one of our quarterly strategy meetings. "You've been tracking their personnel moves pretty closely," he observed, scrolling through my research files. "Thinking about poaching talent?" "Always," I said. Talisa Corvain in particular. She's exactly the kind of innovative thinker we need for our environmental sector expansion. "She's married, you know," Marcus said with a knowing look. "Happily, from what I hear." "This is about professional recruitment, not personal interest," I replied, though I was curious about where he'd heard she was happily married. My observations suggested otherwise. The truth about Kaelor and Talisa's relationship became clear when I attended a construction industry conference in Portland. Talisa was the keynote speaker, delivering a presentation on sustainable building practices that had the entire audience mesmerized. Her husband was there too, sitting in the back row, checking his phone and looking profoundly uncomfortable. During the networking reception, I watched their interaction with the analytical skills I'd developed over years of reading people and situations. Kaelor was charming when introduced to other attendees, deploying that easy smile and casual confidence that had always been his trademark. But when left alone with Talisa, his body language shifted completely. He stood too close, his hand possessive on her lower back. When industry professionals approached to discuss her presentation, he inserted himself into conversations where he clearly had nothing to contribute. Most telling was how Talisa's posture changed around him. Shoulders slightly hunched, smile more forced, energy visibly dimmed. "Impressive wife you have there," I overheard someone say to Kaelor near the bar. "Yeah, she's something," Kaelor replied, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely pleased about it. "Sometimes I think she loves those environmental projects more than she loves me." The other man laughed. "Occupational hazard of marrying someone smarter than you." Kaelor's expression darkened. "She's not smarter, just more educated. There's a difference." I filed that comment away, recognizing the insecurity that had always driven my brother's worst impulses. He needed to be the most important person in any room, and Talisa's professional success was clearly threatening that need. Over the next several weeks, I made discreet inquiries through my network. What I learned painted a picture of a marriage slowly disintegrating under the weight of incompatible ambitions and Kaelor's inability to handle being overshadowed by his wife's achievements. A mutual contact at Meridian Holdings mentioned that Talisa had been working increasingly long hours, staying late at the office, and traveling frequently for client meetings. Another source mentioned seeing her having what appeared to be tense phone conversations in her car after work. But the most revealing information came from an unexpected source. Jennifer, my former college friend who had kept me updated on Kaelor and Lunara's failed marriage, called me one evening with news she thought I'd find interesting. "Remember how I used to tell you about your brother and his first wife?" she said. "Well, I just found out he got remarried. Some environmental engineer. Really successful from what I hear." "Good for him," I said neutrally. "The thing is, I was talking to someone who knows them, and apparently it's not going well. Same pattern as before. He gets insecure when his partner is more successful than he is, starts picking fights, trying to undermine their confidence. Some people never learn from their mistakes. The worst part is, this woman sounds amazing. Like, she could probably have anyone she wanted, and she's stuck with someone who's trying to make her smaller so he can feel bigger." I thought about Talisa's presentation at the conference, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about sustainable innovation, the way that light dimmed when Kaelor approached. Jennifer was right. She deserved better than someone who saw her success as a threat, rather than something to celebrate. That's when I began to consider whether Kaelor's eventual downfall might provide an opportunity for strategic advantage. Not revenge exactly, but rather a convergence of justice and business opportunity. I had Marcus run a comprehensive analysis of Meridian Holdings' market position and growth trajectory. What we discovered was a company with brilliant innovation potential but questionable long-term financing. They were exactly the kind of acquisition target that could accelerate our expansion into sustainable technology markets. The question was whether their key talent would stay through a transition, or whether the disruption might create opportunities to recruit people like Talise to our organization instead. Either way, I was prepared when Kaelor's world started crumbling. I'd spent months understanding the players, the relationships, and the pressure points that would determine how events unfolded. When the call finally came at 2:47 a.m., I wasn't surprised. I'd been expecting it for weeks. What surprised me was how completely unprepared Kaelor was for the conversation we were about to have. 3 days after Kaelor's desperate phone call, I arranged to meet him at a small coffee shop in downtown Portland. Not because I intended to help him, but because I wanted to see the wreckage up close. To understand exactly how thoroughly his world had collapsed and what role I might play in determining what rose from the ashes. He arrived 15 minutes early, a man I barely recognized as my younger brother. The golden boy confidence had been stripped away, leaving someone who looked hollow and desperate. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping much at all. "Fendrel," he said when I approached his corner table. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I said, settling into the chair across from him, but curiosity got the better of me. Curiosity about what? About how the man who once called me pathetic ended up begging that same pathetic man for salvation. He flinched at the words, staring down at his untouched coffee. "I deserved that." "You deserve much worse than that. But let's start with an explanation. Tell me exactly what's happening with your marriage." For the next 20 minutes, Kaelor laid out the slow-motion disaster his life had become. How Talise's career success had made him feel inadequate and resentful. How he'd started picking fights about her work schedule, her business trips, her ambitions. How she'd grown distant and cold in response to his increasing demands for attention and validation. "She says I'm trying to sabotage her career," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "that I can't handle being married to someone more successful than me. And is she right? I don't know, maybe. I just want to feel important to her again. But every day she comes home talking about some new project or innovation and I feel smaller. So you try to make her smaller too. I never meant to. I just wanted her to prioritize our relationship. By undermining her professional achievements. By asking her to care about our marriage as much as she cares about her job." I studied his face, seeing the same insecurity and selfishness that had driven him to steal Lunara 5 years earlier. Some people never learned from their mistakes, they just repeated them with different victims. And now she's leaving you. She filed for divorce last week. Says she's tired of apologizing for being successful, tired of pretending to be less than she is just to protect my ego. Smart woman. She's taking everything, Fendrel, the house, half the business assets, even the dog. But that's not the worst part. What's the worst part? He looked up at me then, and I saw something like panic in his eyes. She knows about the Meridian Holdings information. She knows I've been going through her files, trying to find something I could use to hurt her career if she left me. My blood went cold. You were planning to sabotage her professionally? I was desperate. I thought if I could prove she was sharing confidential information with competitors, maybe I could force her to stay, make her choose between her career and our marriage. And instead, you just proved she was right to leave you. She has evidence, Fendrel. Screenshots of me accessing her laptop, recordings of me pressuring her to share client information. If this gets out, it won't just destroy my reputation. It could land me in federal prison for industrial espionage. I sat back in my chair, processing what he'd just told me. Kaelor hadn't just destroyed his marriage through insecurity and manipulation. He'd committed actual crimes in the process, and now he wanted me to somehow make it all go away. What exactly do you think I can do about this? You have connections at Meridian Holdings. Everyone knows you're planning to expand into their market. Maybe you could talk to them. Convince them that prosecuting me wouldn't be worth the legal costs. You want me to use my professional relationships to cover up your criminal behavior. I want you to help your brother avoid prison. I looked at him sitting there, broken and desperate, asking me to risk my own reputation to save him from the consequences of his actions. The same man who had stolen my fiancée and called me pathetic. The same man who had never once apologized for destroying my life 5 years earlier. "Do you remember what you told me that night in my apartment?" I asked quietly. "Fendrel, please, can't we move past that? You said some men are born to win and others are born to watch winners take what they want. Do you remember that?" His face crumpled. I was wrong. I was cruel and wrong, and I've regretted it every day since. "Have you? Because from where I'm sitting it looks like you learned the wrong lesson. You didn't learn to stop taking what doesn't belong to you, you just learned to target different victims. That's not fair, isn't it? You took Lunara because you couldn't handle seeing me happy with someone you wanted. Now you're trying to destroy Talisa's career because you can't handle her being more successful than you. Same pattern, different woman. I love Talisa. No, you don't. You love the idea of possessing her. You love the ego boost of being married to someone impressive, but you don't love her enough to celebrate her success or support her ambitions." He was crying now, tears streaming down his face in the middle of a crowded coffee shop. "Please, Fendrel, I know I don't deserve your help. I know I've been a terrible brother. But I'm begging you, I'll do anything. I'll sign over my share of Dad's business. I'll never contact you again after this. Just please help me avoid prison." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. "Set it on the table between us." "What's that?" he asked. "Open it." With shaking hands, he opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents. His face went white as he read the first page. "How did you get this?" "I told you I have connections at Meridian Holdings. What you're looking at is a complete record of your attempts to access confidential information. Screenshots, email logs, recorded conversations. Everything Talisa compiled before she filed for divorce. You've been working with her?" "I've been working with several people who have your best interests at heart, whether you realize it or not." He flipped through the pages, his expression growing more desperate with each revelation. "This is enough to destroy me completely." "Yes, it is. But you're going to help me, right? You're going to make this go away?" I leaned forward, my voice calm and controlled. "Kaelor, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. 5 years ago, you stood in my apartment and called me pathetic. You stole the woman I loved and told me I never deserved her. You destroyed my life because you were jealous and insecure. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm not finished. You asked me for help tonight and I'm going to give it to you, just not the kind you're expecting." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. On the screen was a number I'd programmed earlier that evening. That's the direct line for the federal prosecutor handling corporate espionage cases in Oregon. One call from me, and this entire file gets delivered to their office within the hour. His face went ashen. "You're threatening to turn me in?" "I'm offering you a choice, the same choice you offered me 5 years ago when you destroyed my life." "What choice?" "You can accept the consequences of your actions like a man, or you can keep being the pathetic, selfish person who takes what doesn't belong to him." I stood up, leaving the documents on the table. "Talisa deserves better than you, just like Lunara did. The difference is, this time I'm in a position to make sure she gets it." "Fendrel, wait." "Goodbye, Kaelor. I hope prison teaches you what I couldn't." I walked away without looking back, finally understanding that some forms of justice are worth waiting 5 years to deliver. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of my Seattle headquarters, watching the news coverage of Kaelor's sentencing on the wall-mounted screen. 18 months in federal prison for industrial espionage, followed by 3 years of probation. The judge had been particularly harsh about his attempts to sabotage his wife's career, calling it a betrayal of the most fundamental trust between spouses. "Rough way to learn about consequences," Marcus said, joining me at the window overlooking Elliott Bay. "Some people only learn the hard way," I replied, turning off the television. "The important thing is that justice was served." "And Talisa?" "Started her new position as VP of Sustainable Innovation last week. She's already revolutionizing how we approach environmental compliance in our construction partnerships." Marcus smiled. "Funny how things work out. We get the best engineer in the Pacific Northwest, and she gets a fresh start away from someone who was trying to destroy her career." It had taken careful negotiation to recruit Talisa after her divorce was finalized. Not because she wasn't interested in our offer, but because she was naturally suspicious of my motives. When I finally revealed my connection to Kaelor, she'd been understandably wary. "You're his brother," she'd said during our third meeting. "The one he never talked about." "Former brother," I'd corrected. "Family is supposed to support each other's success, not sabotage it." "And you're offering me this position because you want to help me, or because you want to hurt him?" "I'm offering you this position because you're brilliant at what you do, and my company needs that brilliance." What happened to Kaelor was the result of his own choices, not my manipulation. She'd studied my face carefully before accepting the offer. "I want to be clear about something. I'm not looking for another man who sees my career as either a threat or a trophy. I'm looking for colleagues who value competence over ego." That's exactly what you'll find here. And she had. Talise had integrated seamlessly into our corporate culture, bringing innovations that had already attracted attention from major clients and industry publications. More importantly, she seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years, according to mutual contacts who'd known her during her marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me that in trying to help my brother 5 years ago, I'd ended up creating the exact circumstances that led to his downfall. Not through revenge or manipulation, but simply by becoming successful enough to offer his wife a better alternative when she needed one. My assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Mr. Caro, there's someone here to see you, says it's personal." I walked to the reception area, expecting to find a client or business partner. Instead, I found Lunara Feldrin, looking older and more subdued than I remembered, but still recognizably the woman I'd once planned to marry. "Hello, Fendril," she said quietly. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced." "Lunara, what brings you to Seattle?" "I heard about Kaelor. About the sentencing. I wanted to see if you were okay." We walked to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from the bustle of employees and visitors. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her wedding ring in a gesture I remembered from our time together. "I'm fine," I said. "Better than fine, actually." "I know. I've been following your career. Forbes, Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch. You've built something incredible." "Thank you." She was quiet for a moment, then looked up at me with those green eyes that had once meant everything to me. "I owe you an apology, several apologies, actually." "You don't owe me anything." "I do. I handled everything wrong 5 years ago. The sneaking around, the lies, letting it go on for months instead of being honest about my feelings, you deserved better than that." "Yes, I did." She flinched slightly at my directness. "I also want you to know that I left him. Kaelor and I divorced 3 years ago." "I heard." "It was a mistake from the beginning, not just leaving you, but thinking that passion and excitement were the same thing as love. Kaelor was intense and unpredictable, but he was also selfish and insecure in ways I didn't recognize until it was too late. I'm sorry it didn't work out." "Are you? Really?" I considered the question carefully. 5 years ago, I would have been devastated to learn that their marriage had failed. I would have seen it as validation of my worth, proof that she'd made the wrong choice. Now I felt only a distant sadness for the pain we'd all caused each other. "I'm sorry you had to experience the same betrayal and manipulation that I did," I said finally. "No one deserves that, regardless of the mistakes they've made." Tears welled up in her eyes. "He tried to control everything about my life, my job, my friends, my family relationships. When I told him I wanted to go back to school for my PhD, he said I was being selfish, that I cared more about my career than our marriage." Sounds familiar. I kept thinking about what you said that night, about how you would have supported my ambitions, celebrated my successes. I realized I'd given up the right man for the wrong reasons. You gave up a safe choice for an exciting one. That's not unreasonable. It was when the exciting choice turned out to be a prison sentence. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Seattle's busy professionals hurry past the lobby windows. Finally, she spoke again. "I know I have no right to ask this, but I was wondering if you might be interested in getting coffee sometime. Not as anything romantic," she added quickly. "Just as two people who used to care about each other, trying to find some kind of peace with the past." I looked at her, this woman who had once been the center of my universe, and realized that the pain and anger I'd carried for so long had finally transformed into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of acceptance that people make choices based on who they are at the time, and those choices create consequences that ripple through everyone's lives. "I don't think that would be a good idea," I said gently, "not because I'm angry, but because we're different people now." The man you left and the woman who left him don't exist anymore. She nodded, understanding. You're right. I just wanted you to know that I'm glad you found success and happiness. You deserve both of those things. So do you, Lunara. So does everyone. After she left, I returned to my office and looked out at the Seattle skyline. The city stretched endlessly toward the horizon, full of people building lives and careers and relationships, making choices that would define who they became. 5 years ago, I'd thought my life was over when Kaelor called me pathetic and stole my fiancée. I'd believed that betrayal was the end of my story rather than the beginning of a better one. Now I understood that the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful that their opinions become irrelevant. Kaelor had called me pathetic, but his judgment no longer mattered because I'd proven it wrong through my actions rather than my words. Sometimes the people who hurt us do us the greatest favor by forcing us to discover what we're truly capable of achieving. And sometimes the best gift you can give someone is exactly what they ask for, even when they don't realize what they're really asking for. Justice, it turns out, has its own timeline, and patience is its most powerful weapon. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.